The inescapable prison, Alcatraz Island. In 1962, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary was America's most infamous maximum security prison. Perched on a rocky island in the cold, treacherous currents of San Francisco Bay, it was reserved for the most troublesome and escape-prone inmates. The warden claimed, "No one has ever escaped from Alcatraz and lived to tell about it." The official record supported this. Of the 36 men who had attempted escape in 14 separate incidents, 23 were caught, 6 were shot and killed, and 2 drowned. The remaining 5 were presumed drowned and their bodies never recovered. The stage was set for the most elaborate escape attempt in its history. The masterminds, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. The plan was orchestrated by 3 men. Frank Morris, a highly intelligent and resourceful criminal with a history of escapes from other institutions. His IQ was measured at 133. He was the undeniable mastermind, engineering the complex mechanics of the break. John Anglin, the more cautious and calculated of the Anglin brothers, often seen as the co-planner alongside Morris. Clarence Anglin, John's younger brother, known for his immense physical strength, which was crucial for the manual labor required. A 4th man, Alan West, a car thief, was involved in the planning and construction phase but would ultimately be left behind. Their cells were adjacent to each other in the prison's B block, on the 2nd tier in a section known as Broadway, because of its wide central walkway. The plan, a monumental feat of ingenuity. The plan, which took over 6 months to execute, was breathtaking in its patience and creativity. 1. Expanding the ventilation grates. Each of their cells had a small ventilation grate in the upper rear wall about 6 by 10 inches. The grates were set in concrete, but the men discovered the concrete around the grates was old and could be chipped away with tools. Using stolen and improvised tools, including a homemade drill made from a stolen vacuum cleaner motor and spoons welded into metal picks, they slowly and silently widened the holes around the grates. They worked mostly during the nightly music hour, when the sounds of inmates playing instruments would mask their scraping too. The false wall and the utility corridor. Behind the wall of their cells was an unguarded utility corridor about 2 feet wide, containing pipes and electrical conduits that ran vertically through the prison. Once they removed the grates and chipped away enough concrete, they could squeeze into this corridor. To hide their work, they created fake grates using cardboard, paint, and soap mixed with dust to mimic the texture of the wall. They would place these over the holes whenever they weren't working. 3. Building a raft in life preservers. This was their most ingenious creation. Over months, they stole over 50 raincoats from the prison's workshop. Using the raincoats, contact cement, and a homemade heating implement, an accordion-like device made from stolen concertina wire and blown by mouth to heat the glue, they constructed a 614-foot raft. The raincoats were painstakingly glued together to form airtight panels, which were then vulcanized with steam pipes to create a durable, multi-layered rubberized canvas. Life preservers. They also built several functional life jackets and a small inflatable raft to keep their supplies dry. Homemade tools and dummies. They crafted a plethora of tools, a periscope to see down the corridor, a wrench to remove bolts, and a rope made of knitted-together socks. Most famously, they created dummy heads to place in their beds during the nightly count to fool the guards. The heads were made from a paste of soap, toilet paper, and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop. They were painted with flesh tones from paint kits available to inmates and were remarkably realistic from a distance. The night of the escape, June 11th, 1962. The plan was set for the night of June 11th. The escape was delayed because Alan West, in his panic to remove the final stubborn bolt in his cell's grate, failed to get out in time. Morris and the Anglins, however, successfully squeezed into the utility corridor. They climbed up the pipes through a network of ducts and onto the prison roof. From there, they used a ventilator shaft to descend to the ground behind the cell block, completely unseen by the guards in the towers. They then scaled 2 12-foot barbed wire fences and made their way to the northeastern shore of the island, the least visible point from the mainland. They climbed up the pipes through a network of ducts and onto the prison roof. From there, they used a ventilator shaft to descend to the ground behind the cell block, completely unseen by the guards in the towers. They then scaled two 12-foot barbed wire fences and made their way to the northeastern shore of the island, the least visible point from the mainland. They inflated their raft and life preservers using a small concertina-like instrument. At approximately 10:00 p.m., they pushed off into the frigid, swirling waters of San Francisco Bay. The current was running at a strong ebb tide that night, pulling westward toward the Golden Gate and the open Pacific. The discovery and the manhunt. The escape wasn't discovered until the next morning at the 7:30 a.m. count. A guard jabbing the sleeping inmates with a stick was shocked when Frank Morris's dummy head rolled away. A massive manhunt was launched. The FBI, Coast Guard, and police scoured the bay and the surrounding areas of Marin County. They found few clues. On Angel Island, directly north of Alcatraz, they found a homemade life preserver and paddles. On a nearby beach, they found a waterproof packet containing family photos of the Anglin brothers and a receipt for the contact cement, all carefully wrapped to stay dry. A Norwegian freighter reported seeing a body floating in the bay a day after the escape, but it was never recovered. No bodies were ever found. After a 17-year investigation, the FBI officially closed the case on December 31, 1979, concluding that the men most likely drowned in the cold, swift waters of the bay. Their bodies, the theory went, were swept out to the Pacific Ocean. The unsolved mystery: did they survive? The official conclusion is drowning. However, the lack of bodies and the sheer brilliance of the plan have fueled endless speculation that they might have succeeded. Evidence for drowning. The bay's conditions that night were brutal: 55-degree or 13-degree water, strong currents, and fog. Hypothermia would set in within 20-30 minutes. Their raft was a flimsy, homemade contraption. If it punctured, they would have had little chance. The Anglin brothers were not strong swimmers. If they had survived, they were famous fugitives. How could they have remained hidden for so long without a single confirmed sighting? Evidence for survival. They were meticulous, intelligent planners. They would have studied the tides. The ebb tide on the night of June 11th would have helped carry them north, not out to sea if they timed it correctly. The items found, paddles, photos, were found north of the island, washed ashore, suggesting they made it at least that far. In 2015, the FBI received a supposedly credible letter from a family friend of the Anglins, claiming all three men had survived and that the brothers had lived into old age, with John dying in 2008 and Clarence in 2011. The FBI has stated the letter contained no verifiable facts. In 2018, researchers from the Dutch television show Mythbusters. The search used a similar raft and tide charts to demonstrate it was possible to reach the Marin headlands alive. The legacy. The escape from Alcatraz remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American criminal history. It was the catalyst for the prison's closure just a year later in 1963, due to rising costs and the crumbling infrastructure that the inmates had so cleverly exploited. The story of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers endures as a legend, a tale of human ingenuity pitted against an unforgiving system. Whether they perished in the dark waters of the bay or vanished into the night to live new lives, they achieved what no one else had. They escaped from the rock and left the world wondering forever